Work on Doctor Who, they said. It will be fun, they said. And next thing you know, you're in your friend's living room, the hand up an alien's ass.
If you're in the UK, you may now have got your trembling hands on the Doctor Who The Collection Season 15 box set. And if you're a fan of Horror of Fang Rock, the first thing you'll have done is check out the updated special effects across a staggering 146 different shots. This has all been masterminded by Belfast wizard Chris Thompson, who has developed a great reputation for largely digital effects by working with the likes of the Jerry Anderson estate on properties like Thunderbirds and Big Finish on animated Doctor Who trailers. His work for the collection series began with the Season 17 trailer. Coming up in this video, Chris will explain why BBC Studios decided to give Horror of Fang Rock new special effects instead of its Season 15 Bedmay Underworld, 3 key design decisions that Chris made while creating a new Routan menace, and what made him go for a practical Routan puppet instead of a CGI one, and how he actually made this new Beast of Fang Rock. But before we get into that, let's hear Chris's thoughts on why optional special effects aren't necessary at all for classic Doctor Who reissues.
They're basically for people that want to either reconnect with a beloved story all over again, like a way of watching it for the first time again, or people who don't have the same level of, like, they don't watch old media, they're only familiar with new media that might want to dip back and enjoy Doctor Who, and then there's a risk that their immersion's broken by, like, a special effect. Like, there needs to be a level of accounting for that and give it as good a polish as we can possibly give it. I did Snake Dance and Enlightenment at the start of last year, and they had offered me Underworld for season 15. And I know a few people have been commenting, like, why not Underworld on this subject? And I'm going to answer that question now. Rotoscoping is very hard. When it comes to Fang Rock, a lot of it, obviously everyone's quite excited about the Routan, but 95% of the work is fixing all the rotoscoping that goes on in the lamp room. And the first shot where you see the 3 lighthouse keepers on the bridge, like all together, all 3 of them, took me about 3 or 4 days to do on its own. And there's about 146 shots in Fang Rock. So multiply that workload by almost every shot in the later episodes of Underworld.
For people who don't know, kind of including me, can you explain what rotoscoping is?
So rotoscoping is a VFX term for cutting people out and replacing the background when you don't have a green screen. And you just cut things out and, like, draw lines around people and then replace the background. The collection DVDs have done this before on some of the Third Doctor stories. I think the Terror of the Autons had some really extensive rotoscoping cleanup for the Little Rubber Man and the Floating Time Lord, and when they find the dead body in the lunchbox, they basically replaced the background and had the camera movement match up to that. And there's a lot of that already in Fang Rock, because it was a very new technology that they're very much trying to, like, push to its limit, but also were honestly very experimental with it. Like, they're trying to use a blue screen through 2 sheets of glass and fog. And in some shots, the camera's, like, moving, and then whoever's manning the camera looking at the background has to, like, follow them, like, a second later. So that is the long-winded explanation as to why not Underworld. Like, the actual CSO is pretty good in Fang Rock. It's probably better than Underworld, but they do still have that problem whenever the camera shifts, or they like to, like, orbit cameras back in those days for reasons that make my life very difficult. And there's quite a bit of that. And yeah, just trying every trick in the book to make the actors blend in with the background to make it not look a bit odd.
So Underworld, just to sum up on Underworld then, that's something that was suggested and then you kind of looked into it and realised how extensive it would have to be, or?
It was that. Like, so this process is very collaborative. Like, both Russell and Pete, who are my 2 points of contact for these sets, are really lovely and really good at basically being like, this is what we want, but we want to know what you want and what you want to contribute. And so I explain the Underworld situation. And it's like, in a way that, like, I would tackle this if you want me to, but I have a counter proposal, which is we can probably, like, Fang Rock, you could probably make Underworld a C grade story, or you could maybe add a little bit of polish in Fang Rock and make, like, maybe bring it up into an A star as opposed to just an A. The sort of the cherry on top was I will try my best to do a practical Routan as well, because I've talked to a few people I know, like, I'm good friends with the manager of Forbidden Planet Belfast, and like, he did mention when he watched Horror Fang Rock as a kid, there was just so much excitement building up to the last episode that then just kind of fell by the wayside whenever it was a ball. And again, I'm not necessarily criticizing the original design. Like, the new Routan is designed to look like the original from the top, but I think they went for something quite high concept. While it's like a very interesting approach, it didn't necessarily fit the tone of the story. I think they really needed something scarier, and it's possibly contributed to why the Routins haven't really come back, except in the adventure game and in Shakedown, I think.
When you said about that choice between Underworld and Fang Rock, you meant that Fang Rock was always going to be treated, have new effects, but if you didn't do Underworld, then those effects could be a bit better. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, it was Underworld or Fang Rock.
Oh, I see. So originally it could have been, just Underworld. I
Yeah.
see.
And
Wow.
don't get me wrong, there's Underworld offers its own challenges, but like that was one of the first stories that Bill Pearson worked on, and like his model work's already incredible. Like it really is just the CSO that needs the work, I think, and maybe the lasers. And like there is a person on YouTube that's done a really good version himself, but for the collection sets, like not only like we like to retain stuff to be as close as possible, and that means everything has to be interlaced, which means like if you're rotoscoping it, you're rotoscoping it at 50 frames per second, which is twice as much as you would have to do normally. So there's just that little bit of extra complexity. Obviously, the history of enhanced special effects, it dates back to that Star Trek HD release where it was only the new versions, and yeah, no, the BBC aren't down that at all. Like it is like this is a little bit of an extra fun thing for people to enjoy. This is not necessarily the default version going forward. Though, huge shout out to Lee for letting me be able to put it on the cover.
Yes, that's a very interesting thing. I mean, that unless I've forgotten something, I think that's a first, isn't it, for a redesigned version of a monster to appear on the cover?
Yeah, because it's the original Mara that's on the season 20 cover. Even though I did the new one there,
Mm.
but I think this time around, I think it was at one of the events. It was probably the Sea Devils. I got 5 minutes to talk to Lee at the bar, and I was like, by the way, I've done a new Rusin. Like, can I send it to you? And he was like, sure. And I sent it to him, and I got like all caps. It's real, and I'm just like, oh, I love that guy. No, it's just, and obviously the cover itself is really, really lovely as well.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? So, I mean, obviously, I could obviously interview Lee about the cover, and it's about time I did when I think about it. But what kind of are you aware of what the key decision kind of was in terms of putting the new Routan on the cover, because it's quite an unusual thing to do.
Um, I was like, "Hey, do you want it?" And he was like, "Sure." Like there's not really a. I don't think there's a huge level of thought behind it. I think it was just because like, well, we've made the effort of making this thing, and the original Rutan is basically just like the new Rutan with the bottom cut off. So, like I said, you could argue it's the same creature. You just don't see the top and the bottom of it in the original episode. So, I think it was maybe Lee was just being nice as a favor to me, but it was very appreciated.
No, I'm sure he wasn't just being nice. It's such an important thing, isn't it? Getting the cover right as well. It's a great design, and it's recognizable. Like you say, it's absolutely recognizable as the Rutan. Yeah, how nice. What kind of made you think, okay, it would be great if we can do this Rutan practically?
Honestly, well, there's a number of reasons. One from a technical standpoint, I had about 3 months on Fang Rock, and I wasn't going to be getting the upscaled episodes until like the second month. So that meant that like I basically had a month of lead time. There's like little to no actual CG in the VFX here. It's all compositing and other stuff. So except for the boat crash, I didn't really have anything to work on. So it kind of made sense that whenever you're doing something in CG, it's like a very quick run up to it, and then there's a lot of post production. Like it's really long in that way. Whereas if you're doing something practically, there's a long build up to making the thing, and then you have the thing and you just shoot it and you're done. With a little bit of sort of post processing to make the eye blink and have it gyrate quite nicely.
Oh,
It just sort of made sense to do that. Also, the life of a VFX artist, particularly a freelance one, is quite lonely. And sometimes you just want to get your friends together and play with a rubber monster.
in a kitchen.
Pretty much, it's I made it in my kitchen, but we cleared out my friend's living room and shot all the stuff there.
Wow, isn't that amazing? Well, what you can do these days, eh?
Work on Doctor Who, they said. It will be fun, they said. And next thing you know, you're in your friend's living room, the hand up an alien's ass. I had a really great team on this. First off, my friend Ryan. Ryan is like he runs a 3D print company, and how we were able to like basically, I was able to design the thing, in 3D, and then I was able to invert it to make these, which are molds.
Oh wow!
And the idea is that you seal these up, and you have an inverted bit of a Routan,
Wow!
or in this instance, that's the leg tentacles.
Nice.
And you fill that with silicone, like colored silicone, and after about like an hour, you pull that open, and you got a tentacle, which you
Nice.
then stick together with more silicone. So my friend Ryan helped me print those, and my friend AC, whose house we were using, ended up like being the main guy holding the thing because, being my first puppet, the thing was very heavy, and so we basically required one puppeteer to hold it, while two others, in this instance Ryan and my friend Ben, who's an experienced puppeteer from America, would sort of operate the limbs. And then whenever it's walking up the stairs, I would have the front tentacles on strings, so it'd be sort of like waggling in front of them while the legs were moving. So it was a very elaborate puppet.
How
it's actually
cool!
it's actually behind me. I think you can see him there.
Oh,
Just
he
like
look at you casually revealing the Routan behind you in the room.
he's now a lamp.
Yeah, I was going to say it's all lit up, but that's not just it's not just glow in the dark paint, is it? That really is glowing from within.
Probably just to let your audience know, like I've asked Jason not to. I don't want to reveal too much about this. We've looked when we're looking at Fang Rock. There's an element of they're clearly trying not to show the Routan for a while, and it's really only just because we're watching things in HD that we can see that they reveal the Routan far earlier than they probably intended to. Like when
Oh,
Leela's looking down at it, you can kind of just see it's just the Routan slithering along, or when it's coming up the lighthouse. So like, there's a couple of shots where we obscure it a lot more, and in the trailer we've made it like the shots in the trailer aren't necessarily the best shots of the Routan. So there's a lot more elaborate stuff to come with it, if that makes any sense. So I kind of want people to be able to experience this thing for the first time and be like, wow, that's kind of cool.
and
Damn, that runs upstairs fast. Well, again,
nice.
that's another thing that was sort of I felt needed addressing with the Routan, is because they only have that one shot of it going up the staircase. So, and it feels like, again, because I watched it with somebody that had never watched classic TV before, in order to kind of get a litmus test of what needs replaced and what doesn't. And it looks like it's spending about 5 to 10 minutes walking up one set of stairs, when that's clearly meant to be like around the lighthouse. So, we've done stuff like it doesn't necessarily, like there's one shot it doesn't turn up at all. Like the Doctor looks around the corner and he can see the lights of it behind the curve of the staircase, but it's not there yet. So whenever it eventually jumps out and kills Skinsail, it's a lot more interesting. But
Wow. Yeah,
yeah,
this sounds great. And like you said, I mean, if you'd said, "Oh, let's show people a clip of the Routan in situ now," it'd be very exciting and everything, but it would take something away from seeing it in full context in the finished thing, wouldn't it?
yeah. Well, like I'm really pleased with the full transformation scene. And
So this is the scene where Reuben, the chief lighthouse keeper, sort of we see a hint of that in the trailer, do we? Do we
you
where
see
he
the
kind
very
of
beginning of it, and you see the very end of it.
okay. Yeah, so he kind of the Routan kind of almost kind of yeah, comes out like that, like a sort of an
Hmm.
eclipse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sort of splits out of him.
Very cool. Very cool. Speaking of key things about the Routan, what were two or three of the sort of the key design decisions that you made when you were designing it?
The first one, which I've mentioned before, is it needed to look like the original from the top. Mainly because, like, you don't want to just rewrite the book on them this late in the day. Like, it's been 50 years, almost. So, like, it sort of needed to be recognizably the Routan. It needed to not look like a Dalek. And because it's going to be somebody's problem eventually, it needed to not look like Krull. So I had to bear that in mind. Also, there was the adventure games that were a couple of years ago, the Gunpowder Plot with Matt Smith, and they had the Routins in it, and they looked very good. They had the eye, but it was like recessed into them, and they floated around. But it was the only time you ever see them meet the Sontarans, and I guess Beta Canon. And I really like that design, particularly the artwork that accompanied it. But I was very adamant I wanted this thing to be able to like walk, because if it's sort of just like floating around, it doesn't really feel. It feels like a special effect, and I didn't really like the way it kind of slithers up the stairs. I wanted something that like could stand tall, like on full extension. It's about as tall as a person, or at least as tall as Reuben. And while I wanted to retain the eye, I wanted to be able to look up, because almost all the shots of the Routan are looking down on it from Tom Baker's point of view. It's got 3 different sets of tentacles. So it's got the version that you see strangling people in the episode. It's got those sort of like ribbed tentacles, which like flip out. Those are the ones that are around the side of it. It's got 2 manipulator tentacles, which are the ones at the front, which are a holdover from the gunpowder pot design. And then it's got 3 major tentacles, which is what it walks on. And those are the ones the key puppeteer ones that we can sort of twist and...
So you're saying that all those tentacles are there at all times. You're not swapping out those tentacles for different requirements, right?
Oh, yep, all of them are there at all times. On the scout Routan, at least. You never know, there could be different types.
What did you mean when you said that the Routan is going to be? Did you say someone else's problem at some point? Is that what you said? I didn't quite.
Oh no, I said Kroll's going to be somebody else's problem at some point.
Kroll, I see. Right,
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Who knows? Who knows? They might talk you into it.
Yeah, it's like, yay, another silicon puppet.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. I'm a huge Godzilla fan, so doing like Invasion of the Dinosaurs or Power of Kroll would be a big one.
I must admit, when I think back to Kroll, I mean, admittedly, I haven't watched it in a little while, but I remember Kroll looking kind of impressively kind of fleshy and quite organic, you know.
I think that's possibly because he was wet.
Yeah.
I think he's a latex puppet, and I remember him when he's destroying the oil rig. I think my issue with Kroll is mainly the fact that he sort of just pops up in the background and is like, hello.
Yeah, what do I do now?
I would love a bit more like have him reach over and have a shadow cast over the landscape, but it's a lovely thing.
You see, you're starting to think about it already, Chris. You know you want to.
Oh, the possibilities, Jason, the possibilities.
I know. So how do you feel about the Horror of Fang Rock as a Doctor Who serial?
It's one of my favorites. Horror of Fang Rock it never seems to make it into the top 10, but loads of people seem to like it's one of their favorite stories. And I love Gothic Doctor Who, and I love Base Under Siege Doctor Who, and the original version of the thing, the black and white one, is one of my favorite movies, and it sort of encapsulates that kind of style perfectly. I don't know, yeah, it was one of the first it was the second Fourth Doctor story I ever saw after the arc in space, and it's a good time.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the practical Routan puppet is going to be augmented by some CG touches. Does it also appear in full CG form in certain shots?
No, it's there is a 3D model of it, obviously, because I had to build one to get it printed, and I did photoscan it just in case, but nope, beyond the eyelids, that's it. It's the same technique I used for the Sea Devils on the series, whatever the last Pertwee season was. It's the same technique I used for the little Sea Devil baby, because I did the eyelids on that.
Ah.
Interesting enough, you hear a lot about CG being soulless, but it's being able to, that little CG element is the bit that actually gives it a personality, because one of the great things about the puppet is that we can get a performance out of it. So whenever the eye narrows, it's obviously kind of pissed off. When the eye's really wide, it's a bit surprised. It's quite helpful, like, to be able to, and particularly retroactively, because at the time I was just focused on like walk up this like loads and loads of times, just like over and over and over, like do as many walk cycles as we could do, so we'll be able to pull something out of that. Because we sort of built an all black staircase for it to walk up, because the background's going to be quite dark anyway, and I wanted to look like it was done with the technology at the time. So it may not necessarily be the most perfect composite in, but yeah. So we had a staircase, and we just walked up the staircase loads of times. I didn't have a whole lot of time to think that much about performance, so it meant retrospectively, whenever I'm editing it together, I'm taking the best parts of it, kind of like sitting there like talking. I can have the eye narrow with the dialogue, or like I slightly distort it a bit, so like when it gets pissed off, it just starts like its head starts vibrating a bit more.
Wow, so much to talk about there. I mean, that final conversation with Tom Baker, is a great conversation. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this looks now.
I quite like the dialogue as well, because the Routan there's just a really it feels like it's taken on Ruben's personality, because it's like, none of that now.
Yeah,
primitive bipeds of no value. Yeah, I just love the way there's just so unusual like school teacher nonchalance about it, like, and it's just a blob that's like, hello. Let's turn this back on you then. Well, how did you feel about the Routan when it first came out?
Well, I mean, I was young. I mean, I loved it, yeah. But when you're a kid, you don't go, oh, that could have been better on so many levels, including design. And you just go, wow, that's a really cool green blob. I was drawing it in comic strips of my own and exercise books, and coloring it in with the sort of one of these kind of pens, but green. Your puppeteer, Andrew Clements, aka AC the Legend, in terms of his YouTube username, he responded to my video, my season 15 announcement video, in which I just immediately assumed that the new Routan was CGI. And so up pops Andrew to tell me it's a puppet, and how exciting and kind of surprising was that? But my first question to you about that is, how do you kind of take that when someone naturally assumes from seeing it that, this Routan is CG?
As a CG artist, I find that very interesting because obviously CG gets a bad rap quite often, and there's a whole rant I could give you about this. But the cut down version is that for me, it's quite interesting that somebody looks at a special effect and it's like that CG, because like obviously like some people love it, some people are like, oh no, it's optional CGI, and like keep that away from my Doctor Who. Then they'll like look at it and be like, oh, it looks terrible, and then somebody's like, by the way, it's practical, and they're like, oh well, I like it now, even though it's the same shot. And it makes me think of like the new Top Gun movie where they've been really pushing like this is all practical, and then none of the planes are practical; they're all CG. Like
Ah,
there's a ton of shots where like the only practical thing is the actor's head, and everything else is CG. And they did shoot like on aircraft, but it'd be different aircraft, or they'd only have one aircraft and not five of them. But everyone's like, it's so great that this is practical when it's not. So I find the perception quite interesting. I don't see it as an insult at all because like one's pastels, one's watercolors. Um, in fact, like as long as it's not AI, really. Like one of the reasons I did this was because we are in the midst of something of an AI apocalypse, in terms of the art world, and I really wanted to do something that AI couldn't do, which is a practical effect. So that's sort of another reason for the lean into practical stuff.
so that is a bit of a tightrope, I suppose, that any designer, any CG designer has to kind of walk. You almost have to be selfless in making what is a great design, but something that doesn't seem incredibly advanced so as to look out of place in a classic Doctor Who episode. That kind of requires quite a bit of sort of self-control and selflessness, really, doesn't it?
Kind of like in my if I had to have gone the CG route, I would have probably have made it a bit more transparent. I was looking at things like Metroid and things like that where you can see the brain inside, but again, that's not really what they would have done at the time. The like absolute top level, top tier when it comes to Doctor Who enhanced CGI, I always look at is what Justin and Lindsay Lee did on Nightmare of Eden, because like what they did was redo the model effects to look like model effects, but just better composited.
Yeah.
And they did a like you probably couldn't tell watching that there's like their enhanced effects because it just looks like if the Doctor Who had like much more money, this is probably what it looks like. And particularly on Enlightenment, because like Snake Dance, the Kinder optional Mara is probably one of the most celebrated effects, and there was like a lot of pressure to do something as good as that. And I wouldn't really go down a practical route if I was doing a snake unless I had a really good puppet. Whereas on Enlightenment, I really zeroed in on what else was happening at the time. So the ships in that are very much based on Star Trek 2, and like the way that they're shot and the way that they're lit, with a bit of Star Wars thrown in because Pete really loves Star Wars. It's a tightrope of not going overboard and having everything feel authentic, but while at the same time you want it to look kind of cool as well. Like there's an element of you want to partly show what you can do, but also partly sort of try and interpret what the original writer wanted. Like
Mm.
what would the optimum version of their vision be?
Speaking of vision, as one viewer of the season 15 announcement video that I made pointed out, it totally makes sense for the Rutan to have a kind of a really visible eye because we get POV shots, right? And
Hmm. Well, that was also a Space 1999 thing I thought about because are you familiar with Space 1999?
I watched it as a kid, but haven't revisited it since. I know I liked it back then.
Do you remember the trauma nightmare episode Dragon's Domain?
No, it sounds like I should if I had seen that.
So it's the famous one. It's the one with the ghost ship, and they go on board, and there's this creature with like it's a really dark creature with this really bright eye, and it like starts like grabbing people, and they come out as charred skeletons, and it's absolute nightmare fuel. It's probably not as like I've know people who've watched it as adults and been like it's not nearly as bad, but it's worth a look. But like I said, it's a really dark creature with a really bright eye, and I wanted the reverse for the Routan. So it's a really bright creature, which is luminous, as we know, but
Look at that T.
also it's got that like really like it's an obsidian ball I got from a witch shop.
Oh,
So not only does it ward off bad spirits, but also it's like perfectly black.
Hmm.
So unless there's light glinting off it, it's just a void, like a shark's eye.
Hmm.
And I think that's quite effective. Like, it looks cute whenever it's on the table, and it's usually the unmodified eye, which is when it looks cute. But whenever when the eyelids are on it, it looks a bit more intimidating.
You very kindly sent me a few kind of behind the scenes shots, work in progress shots. Could you just
Hmm.
sort of quickly talk us through the sort of the different stages? Because we have a shot of kind of like the sort of the sort of central head piece by itself. So that was the first bit you showed us that was made in the molds.
Yeah, so that was the first part. I got that 3D printed because I needed to know this was going to work for number one, because I'd never done this before and I didn't really know how effective silicone would be, like, coming out of one of these unprepared. Like, there's a lot of videos that show you how to do reverse molds and stuff like that, but I cut out a lot of intermediate stuff by just printing a reverse mold and doing it that way. But yeah, so I printed this section first, and I ordered the obsidian ball, and but in the meantime, I had like a blue tack ball I rolled up in the same dimensions. I shoved that in, and then filled it with silicone, pulled it out, and it was perfect. Like, it's what I sent you, the little doodad. And then whenever I took the blue tack ball out and put the obsidian one in, it fit perfectly. And that's kind of when I was like, right, I have a green light to do this. Let's do the rest of it. Yeah, from then I did I started to do the tentacles, and there's the behind the scenes bit, like sitting on the bottle,
Mm.
which is when I was painting it, because the only way to paint silicon is with more silicon. And then comes the dome. The dome was the last bit I did, and so what I should have done is I should have 3D printed another big round mold that would have all the veins and stuff like that I wanted. But I was like, I could probably save a bit of budget here by getting an IKEA lampshade and, like, filling that void with something and then just pouring up between it. And so I bought some silicone from a shop down the road, like it's about 20 minutes away, and I start filling this thing up and then realize I've not got enough. So, like, about halfway up, and I've got an hour before this thing cures and becomes useless.
Oh,
So get in the car, speed up the motorway, like, handbrake turn into, like, the foyer of the shop, run in and be like, hey, can I have more of that? Like, quickly, like, panic buy more silicone, way too much silicone. And they very, like, calmly, like, measure it all out and just get it all ready, and, like, here you go. It's like, thank you. Jump back in the car, handbrake into the thing, run in, pour it up, shove it in the thing, and then the aftermath of all that is the video I sent you of, like, my kitchen in complete disarray. And I remember getting it in just in time and then just, like, collapsing and waiting for this thing to harden. And the result is that's why the Routan's so heavy,
ah,
because there's so much silicone in it. And I ended up carving a whole pile of it away and using it for other stuff. But yeah, that's that. Like, if I went back and did it again, I'd probably 3D print that section properly. And I don't know, it looks fine the way it is. But I'll know for future.
you mentioned the stairs in the Fang Rock Lighthouse and sort of making your own stairs. How does that work in terms of how it's going to look on screen? Will we see the original staircase when the Doctor looks down it, or will it be a new staircase?
Sometimes you'll see a new staircase. So I looked at lighthouses, and the staircase tended to widen out. So the Fang Rock Lighthouse is a bit unusual because the stairs are on the outside and the rooms are on the inside,
Hmm.
even though the windows are on the outside. But it's still, like, I don't want to sound like I'm dissing the original production designers. Like, Fang Rock has an incredible production design to it, and, like, as we touched upon, all the gothicness and the lamp house and things like that. Sometimes you see the original stairs. So when the Routan's transforming, I was able to paint out the original and sort of incorporate the original stairs into the scene. When the Routan's having the conversation with the Doctor, it's on the original staircase because they only had one set of stairs, as I mentioned previously, and because they have those shots of the Routan slowly shuffling up them, you have both parts of the staircase that you can just cut a line down the middle, and that gives you an entire staircase. Yeah, like, sometimes it was more effective than other times, and sometimes it just made more sense to redo the entire staircase. Like, the bit in the original episode when the Routan's dying, and, like, they've clearly gone down to the bottom stairs, and I figured a different spot for that. So just to make it a bit more dramatic, and also to sort of explain why they don't slip on them on the way down. Uh, it's really hard to, like, have a dramatic final speech for your character when it's farting itself to death. Uh,
Tricky.
we try our best. Um,
Now,
But yes, I think it's quite funny. Practical puppet CG stairs in some instances.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I hadn't thought about that interesting juxtaposition there.
I've made the lighthouse lamp brighter and given it a bit of a slight flare to it. Like nothing distracting, but the idea is to on the original it would flare, but the CSO would cut it out. So you'd see all the bars and stuff get brighter, but the background wouldn't, and it wouldn't show up on the camera. So I've put that back in, which sometimes gives like a smoky impression to like the shots, and it makes it look a little bit more eerie, I think. Other stuff like the scene just after Ben gets killed, all the lights are off, and like that all needs to be painted back in because the everything dark in the scene is like half there, and that took me a couple of days. But
Wow.
stuff like that.
Oh, you mentioned the shipwreck earlier, and there's a very quick snippet of that in the trailer for season 15. It's nice. It's nice to know that that's going to look more impressive now.
I tried to watch these with people who've never not familiar with old media, and I wasn't originally going to replace the shipwreck. In my mind I was like, that's fine. I didn't really want to take out the original effect, and I watched it with my friend Rosie, and that cliffhanger happened, and she sort of turned to me like, "Really?" So I was like, "Okay, maybe I'm redoing the ship," but it's a slightly bigger ship now. It's still a steam yacht, but it's a bit bigger, and hopefully it's a little more impressive. I don't know. I'm quite proud of the waterwork on that one.
Oh yeah, nice. I love that cliffhanger. It's a great example of actually a really weird Doctor Who cliffhanger because it's basically a ship crashing onto the island full of people we don't know,
Yeah,
and yet it's kind of sold as. I think the fact that it is a cliffhanger kind of makes it impactful.
it's sort of what I appreciate about it is it sets the tone, like a dangerous tone, if that makes any sense. Like they're on a island and the lamp's not working, so it kind of sets up as to why they're so keen to have the lamp working for the rest of the episode.
Hmm.
But also, I think it's related to thalassophobia. But like, I live in Belfast. We've got the Titanic Museum, and one of the things that they do is, if you go to like the opening of the tour, they have this a shot of the Titanic. It's like a big cinema screen that sort of opens up in front of you, but the Titanic just sort of appears and it's just going straight towards you, and like its black hull sort of like is designed to envelop the screen, which then lifts. But it just looks like you're about to get run over by a boat, which I find terrifying. So, like the shot that's in the trailer basically references that.
I see. Yeah, yeah, because it does feel like the ship is literally bearing over you. Yeah. No,
One of the things I actually, when I was working on this, is that I would put on like foghorn, like lighthouse sounds, because you can get those 3R things on YouTube, and you just have this like, and then just like the sound of the wind and stuff, just to just get like just enjoy that. Really, just enjoy the mise en scène.
just to set the scene for yourself.
Yeah.
So from everything you've said, and just small touches like the lighthouse beam being a little bit brighter, and all of that, it really feels like this was a labor of love for you.
Like they all are. Any project I'm given, like sort of, I do try to give it my all. Like I said, I love a challenge, and I think particularly because I've got so visceral memories of Fang Rock growing up as a kid, and like I remember whenever we're having dinner the day before the Leela shoots, the producer Paul being like, "Don't f this up." It's my favorite episode. So it's like, cool, no pressure.
Nice.
Like I said, I do love throwing myself into these things, and hopefully going a little bit above and beyond. And but like, fingers crossed, when it comes to the effects, is like hopefully 70% of them you're not going to notice, and that's the idea. Where originally you may have noticed a bit of the set disappearing, now it doesn't.
Mm.
That's kind of the hope.
Now, lastly, let me ask you, when the season 15 box set comes out, are you going to be eagerly scouring fan forums to see the reaction, or are you going to, hop on a plane to the Australian outback?
Um, a bit of both. Like when the season 15 trailer dropped, I'm not gonna lie, we did sort of look through all the YouTube reactions and all the AC sent me your video, and just to kind of get an impression. You want to get Just see how you've done. Honestly, like if people don't like it, I'm not gonna feel too bad because I know I tried. I used to wrestle with imposter syndrome. I don't really have that anymore.
Hmm.
Mainly just because you can't be a person that publishes and produces things and still have that. Yeah, we did our best, and fingers crossed, people enjoy it. There's certain parts of the internet I'm probably not going to look in, but we'll see.
Well, part and parcel of being a creative person is just accepting that someone is going to absolutely hate anything you make.
Yes, and they are going to tell you.
Yeah, they'll go out their way, in fact.
Yeah, they'll be like, I don't like this thing. I am going to associate with it as much as possible.
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
that's something to look forward to, Chris, isn't it? But I mean, most of us have seen what the Routan looks like now, and I think most of us are very happy with it and intrigued and thrilled. And like you said, I hadn't consciously considered this before, but I think optional special effects do kind of give you the opportunity to kind of have like a secondary dopamine hit akin to when you first saw the thing.
Yeah. No, it's like I got that with like Star Trek and even what Star Trek Next Generation did, which wasn't necessarily optional special effects, but just recomposite everything. It's like watching the show again. Like you know what it's going to be, but like in this instance, like oh, like what's the Routan going to do now? Is it going to like slowly shuffle up the stairs, or is it going to be a little bit scarier?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Chris, and for revealing so much exciting stuff.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.